Ladies and gentlemen, a new tradition on the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast has been established here in episode 96. The Podfather never being here for the post Super Bowl show. I don't know. It's two Super Bowls now. He's not been here for the post show each time. Will he not be here for it next year? Will we still be here next year doing a show? Who knows what the future holds for the next year? But I do know what the future holds for the next hour plus, and that is your favorite fastest rising NFL podcast. Once again, back for a new edition. As I said at the beginning, it is the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see in the episode title, Rise of a New Dynasty, we are here to recap what was quite the game, to say the very least. A tale of two halves, one could say about this past Super Bowl. We're going to be breaking this game down in detail and more from the two of us and from the Podfather joining us via video analysis for himself. We're going to talk about it from both sides, some critical things that we noticed, just however long we want to talk about the game. And then after that, we're going to go in a bit of detail for both teams, looking just a little bit ahead. We don't want to get too much into the offseason. We got to let that stuff marinate in first before we give the full breakdown. But of course, I myself introing us, the Iceman Jurg. And joining me here, the Podfather may not be here, but, two is better than one, and especially if that one is me. That should never happen for the people, just a solo podcast episode. So my man joining me, the games master of the show himself, Justin. How we doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. Excited. We finally wrapped up a new season. This is the best time of the year for me as a Jets fan, the off season, because that's the only time my team does anything.
And that is the time that fills you with the most hope and most belief that, next year, it's really our year. And 31 teams are immediately having that thought, got to immediately have that thought Monday morning, because once again, as you said, Justin, second season that we've covered here on the show wrapped up. And Justin, ever since we started the podcast, the Kansas City Chiefs are the only team winning. So do we need to take a hiatus in next year's playoffs so that someone else wins? Maybe something to think about.
This year was the first time I fell into the Jets trap in a long time. And at this point, I don't know if I'm the one that's bringing misery to the rest of the world, but I'm tired of these dynasties. Let's get some parity. Let's get some new teams in there. Let's build up, a new franchise. I mean, Kansas City, all right, 3 out of 5. Great. You did great. Let's get someone new in here. Let's figure it out.
No more for them. Let's have other people. We still have a good amount of teams that have never won a Super Bowl. Maybe we could have that conversation within the coming weeks. A fun little game the three of us could play, looking at all the teams that have not won a Super Bowl yet, and maybe rank them. We'll do something like that. Again, off-season plans, ladies and gentlemen. Off-season plans. For now, we're here to talk about what the end of this season was for the NFL viewers, and of course, it is once again the Kansas City Chiefs reigning supreme over all of us. We're going to get to that in the football portion of the show. And unfortunately, yes, once again, ladies and gentlemen, there will be no ranked podium to end off the episode this week. But trust me, there will still be plenty of chaos involved. With that being said, we still have a little bit of fun. And even though he's not here with us in person, he is always here with us in spirit. So that being said, you guys already know how this works. It is time, ladies and gentlemen, for us to have some fun. And it's time for the Podfather to give us his mind-blowing fact of the week. I wonder, I kind of know what this one's going to be about.
Hello, podcast listeners. As you know, this is the show post-Super Bowl, so I don't appear per contractual obligations. And as the reigning, defending, and undisputed Pick Challenge champion,
it's not contractual.
However, I did want to leave a few notes. And I'm going to start with a mind-blowing fact that I teased Jurg about a little bit going into this week's show. So, as you guys are aware, Steve Wilks was fired this week as the defensive coordinator for the San Francisco 49ers. And when someone gets fired of that stature, you think, well, maybe he's a guy who could probably find his footing somewhere. Of course, all the jobs are filled in the NFL, so unless somebody leaves now. But what I found to be interesting about this was that when you include Steve Wilks' playing career, this is the 13th time that he has lasted just one season in a location. There's a little bit of a contrast with this, so just hear me out for a second here, because he started his career out of college playing in the Arena Football League with the Charlotte Rage back in 1993. And then from 1999 to 2005, he made 7 stops as a coach. Now, the first one's a bit of a cheat because he was at Savannah State for 3 years from 1996 through 1999. However, he lasted just one season as their head coach. He went 6-5 that year. From that position, he went to Illinois State in 2000 as their D-backs coach. Appalachian State, his alma mater, in 2001 as the D-backs coach. East Tennessee State the following year as the defensive coordinator. Then defensive backs coach stops at Bowling Green State in 2003 and Notre Dame in 2004. And a stint at Washington as the secondary coach in 2005. Now, he then went to the NFL and enjoyed several years with several other teams before 2017 with the Carolina Panthers when he was the assistant head coach and defensive coordinator. From there, he went to Arizona, spent a year there as head coach where he was wronged by the system and the Bidwills and Steve Keim, of course. Then he was in Cleveland in 2019 as their defensive coordinator, took a year off from COVID, so I guess he was on the COVID State Fighting Genomes, for a year, if you will. In 2021, he was the D coordinator at Missouri. Then there was 2022, where he had 3 jobs in Carolina, but he was there for 1 year. And then this last stop in San Francisco, where he was the defensive coordinator for all but 1 season. So maybe Steve Wilks is a good coach, but his staying power or his want to stay in one position for a long period of time just isn't there.
What a fact, man. It's funny because, like Rick alluded to at the beginning, in our group chat, he had mentioned something about Steve Wilks because I think I had broken the news to you boys when it came to Steve Wilks, and we will talk about Steve Wilks and like the fallout of that, like as we get into like more of the after, like talking about what's fallen out since the game and like stuff like that. But when I gave that news to you boys, like Rick, as he does with all his stuff, does a little bit of research, and he has that, and he kind of teases us about it, and he's like, no, I'll tell you guys for the show. And, of course, post-Super Bowl show, he's not here. Not contractual, by the way, Rick, just the way it goes. And he has that, man, that is something to say the very least, huh, Justin? Where it's like, we could say, like, you don't get to consistently have jobs like that. At least I would like to think. You can't consistently have jobs like that if you're Steve Wilks, if you're bad at it, right? Like, he has a track record of being good at what he does, especially on the defensive end. And it showed this season, too. The 49ers were an amazing defense in the regular season, had their struggles in the postseason, but were playing a phenomenal 3 quarters of defense in the Super Bowl that, of course, tapered out at the end. Although I don't necessarily blame just him for that. I think there's certain people, that also have a little bit to do with that lack of performance as well. But what a fact there by Rick. And as the ticker says, maybe 14th time is the charm. Maybe next team he'll be there for more than just 1 season. I don't know. We'll see about that. But quite the mind-blowing fact by the Podfather. What a great one. Even when he's not here with us in person, in spirit, he's with us. And now I wonder, because we have one more video of the Podfather to play later on. Will he have the same shirt, Justin? Yes or no? What do you think? Because Rick is notorious for doing one of 2 things. He either is in a different location from where he records each video, or he's wearing a different shirt.
I'm thinking it's going to be different location. I'm going to say same shirt, different location.
Okay, we will see about that later. To be honest, I don't even remember, despite the fact that I had to label the video to make sure I don't play the wrong one by accident. So I think we'll both see later on which is the case. But there is a mind-blowing fact from the Podfather. We thank you, Rick, as always, for the contribution. And of course, realistically he's busy this morning, so that's why he's unable to join us. He's a working man. He is the Podfather father, or the Papa Podfather. I don't know. We've never really decided a full proper nickname, but he has a kid.
Papa Podfather. That's
Papa Podfather's a good one, right? Like
Papa Pod.
Papa Pod. There we go. So
Podfather.
as we wait for Papa Pod to return to the show next week, we have a little bit more fun to talk about before we get to the game analysis. Justin, this would be a quick one here, but we got a bit of a fact or fiction on plate for us. So what do we got?
As proof that we did not coordinate, is Steve Wilks to blame for the 49ers' demise in the Super Bowl?
That's ironic. Oh my God.
Yeah, it's something.
Oh man. Fiction for me. Look, it is fair to be able to say that in the 4th quarter overtime, once again, well, didn't go to overtime last time, but in both Chiefs-Niners Super Bowls, the defense faltered in the later stages of the game. That is a legitimate assessment to say, and whether you want to say the play calling maybe took a step back, maybe you want to say it's just the natural talent of Mahomes being able to figure it out, Maybe because, once again, teams stop playing soft zone coverage against these GOAT caliber quarterbacks, because Brady tore that up in his career and Mahomes is doing the same. But whether you want to say it's all that, I'm not going, like, he's not the reason. I was going to save this stat realistically for us and I can bring this stat up again later on when we do talk about the game. But Justin, I want to give you these three numbers: 1 for 8, 3 for 8, 3 for 12. That is the third downs of all three Kyle Shanahan teams that made it to the Super Bowl. And that 3 of 12 was this past Super Bowl. 9 times a drive ends because you can't get the big third down conversion. That means 9 times the defense has to go out there, man. And for a lot of that, they were able to do so. And again, we're going to get into more game breaking down detail here in just a moment. Maybe this could be the segue, like, as we get into the full game breakdown itself. But no, like, the reason that they lost? No, he's not the reason. That is complete fiction. If we're going to blame a coach, I say we blame the guy that's been there for three of the double-digit Super Bowl losses over the last decade. Because we're starting to see, Justin, when we were growing up, and I think especially when Rick was growing up, and even before us, like, for a very long time, if you had a double-digit lead in the Super Bowl game, you're going to win that, right? Not anymore. I'm trying to think what was the nexus for it. The first one I can definitively think of, and if there was one beforehand, I apologize. Again, this is me just thinking off the dome here. But the first definitive Super Bowl I could think of when it's like a double-digit comeback happening for us is the Patriots Seahawks one. Seahawks were up 10 in that fourth quarter. It looked dead to rights that they were going to be the one. They would have been the first repeat champions, honestly, funny enough, since New England. But the Pats came back and they won that one. And I think, was it 2 years after that one, was the infamous 28-3. And then now we've had multiple ones with Mahomes. Actually, no, every single Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl, it's them coming back. They've came back down double digits in every single Super Bowl to win. A double-digit lead is not enough to win a Super Bowl anymore, clearly, in the game. And that used to be the case, but that's not the case anymore. And whether you want to say it's the talent on the other sides that's consistently doing, because funny fact, some of the quarterbacks that are doing these double-digit quarterbacks happen to be Tom Brady and Patrick Mahomes. So it kind of makes sense. But whether you want to say it's, the defenses that are being called, whether it's a talent thing that you may want to try to say, it's not easy to hold that double-digit lead anymore. And while we could say, part of that is the defense allowing the other team to score, the offense needs to keep on scoring too. And again, we're going to get into this detail in a couple moments. This 49ers team, just off that one stat alone, it's the offense that failed them in this game for me.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disagree with that. There's a lot of things that you can turn around and say. I mean, if the 49ers were 1 third down conversion away from putting it away, they were. And, the Steve Spagnuolo dialed up a great blitz, and it's a different story here today. If you want to make the argument that, sure, the Niners had 2 chances to stop that offense from going down the field and putting points on the board to end the game, you'd be right. They absolutely had that opportunity. And it's wild to think that, they played such great defense against Patrick Mahomes all game, to change the kind of mentality because you don't want to get beaten over the top, which I get it. You're right. You don't want to get beaten over the top, but he's known for tearing up a soft zone. He's done it time and time and time again. And at some point you have to turn around and say, this is not working. We need to get after this guy. We can't let him keep carving up underneath routes for us. I know that there was unfortunately some injury concerns. Dre Greenlaw, honestly, one of the worst injuries I've seen in a Super Bowl, running onto the field on a change of possession. I don't mean to laugh. It was heartbreaking. I think it did make a major difference in the game because he's a great player for them.
And Mahomes immediately started. I don't know if you've seen the footage that's come out since. When that injury happened, Mahomes saw it happen, and he went to the OC. He went to Nagy, I think it was, right away, and pointed out that Greenlaw's he's done.
Yeah,
like that. It definitely made a difference. I'm not saying that's the reason San Fran lost. Not to interrupt your point any further, but when that happens, you clearly saw the Chiefs took advantage right away. That's not an insignificant thing.
That's what great teams do.
Yeah.
But I know that Steve Wilkes ended up getting fired. He was the scapegoat here, And I don't necessarily want to blame Shanahan either. I mean, Shanahan, I think, is a great coach. He's proven that he has been a consistently great coach. He's got to get over that hump. Unfortunately, the hump seems to be one that very few teams have been able to get over. The only team to win a Super Bowl in between was the Rams, and that's because they were playing the Bengals, who happened to be the team that beat Mahomes and the Chiefs that year. It's been a tough go. It's been a really tough go for them, and I think that you're going to see some issues now come up because one, they're not going to be able to pay guys like Brandon Ayuk to stay there. He's clearly been unhappy also, if you see his posts on social media and things like that. And he's been great there. He really has been. But we're going to see we're probably going to see what he's like on another team. That's depth. That's guys that won you games when you needed help. I mean, he was their best receiver this year by far. So it's going to be interesting to see how they turn this around. We'll address that more later, but I don't necessarily know if you could blame the defense or the defensive coordinator rather for this loss, because there were so many opportunities to do so many different things differently, and you would have won that game. Like what was it, 3rd and 4 they had to convert?
Yep.
All they had to do was block. I know it was a cornerback blitz, and it was not something they expected, but they did not have the right play call for that big, and that's the difference in the game.
Yep.
So
100%. And I think that Fact or Fiction is the perfect segue in for us to go in and talk about the game as a whole. Kansas City Chiefs defeat the San Francisco 49ers, ladies and gentlemen, 25-22, the final score. So anyone that put 47.5 as their point total and went over there, oh, you poor soul. I feel so bad for you. Because I actually saw that, Justin, that apparently, I forget if it was 47.5 and then it went to 46.5, or if it was 46.5 that people bet on first, and then it got bumped up to 47.5. Whichever one it was. I forget like the order of events that happened there. A friend of mine was telling me about it. I kind of like in one ear out the other to an extent in that conversation. But ultimately, you know, if you bet when it was the 47.5 and you bet the over, I feel so bad for you people. But that's just how it works. The Kansas City Chiefs defeated the San Francisco 49ers. And they have repeated, ladies and gentlemen, the first NFL repeat champions since the New England Patriots 2 decades ago at this point. Before we get to the breakdown itself, Justin, I feel like we only talk football on the show, but we've made references to other sports here and there, right? And if there's one thing that we could, Rick would also agree on it if he was here, repeating is the most difficult thing arguably to do in sports. And now this is a team that, again, first team in the NFL to repeat since the Patriots of nearly 2 decades ago. When the Tampa Bay Lightning did it here recently in hockey, they were the first hockey team to do it in well over 2 decades at that point. Baseball, it's been quite a while, I think, since we've had a repeat champions in that sport. Correct me if I'm wrong, Justin, maybe the 90s Yankees, I think, were the last ones to repeat. I can't think of anyone who's done it since. Houston's never repeated.
I don't think so. Yeah,
no. So it's been a while in baseball. And then the NBA is the more recent one where it's happening. We've had a couple different repeats with the Warriors and the Heat both happening within the 2010s. So that sport is a little bit more understandable and like can expect a repeat to occur. But, keeping it to football is an extremely, extremely rare thing to happen in this sport in the Super Bowl era. It doesn't always happen. I think just this is the 4th or 5th time to memory. So, and with the Super Bowl initials, we're slowly approaching Super Bowl 60 here. Kind of crazy, right?
Yeah.
But let's just tackle the next 2 years. Let's say in 60 years of Super Bowl play, again, 4 or 5 times it's only happened when it comes to repeating. That is a very, that's a wide margin. And for that to be the case, it just goes to show how difficult it is. So to you, Justin, before we get to the in-game breakdown itself, just the hats off we have to give to the Chiefs. I did not mean to say cheats there, but the Chiefs, because there was no bad. I'm not going to say the reffing wasn't bad this game, but the reffing was not the story this year like it was the end of the game last year. It was not. To give credit to the refs on that end. No one could say that a call decided that game this year. It was relatively fine for the most part. Both teams committed really stupid penalties, we could say. This did not have any referee fingerprints over it, in my opinion. This was just straight up the Chiefs were able to execute in the most important parts, and they repeated. So the topic of repeating and how difficult it is, throwing that over to you here, Justin, before we get to the game itself.
Like you said, it's something that's never really happens. It hasn't happened in 2 decades, and now the Chiefs have the ability to do something that no one's ever done and go after a third. I mean, like that core is going to stay intact next year, and they are going to have the ability to add to it. We're going to see what they do in the draft and what free agents might come out there, but the whole year we were talking about glaring needs, specifically on offense. Imagine they sign a guy like Hollywood Brown or Mike Evans, or they end up trading up in the draft and getting like a top receiver. Like there's a lot that this team could have done better, which is the scariest part of the Chiefs winning the Super Bowl. They were the 3rd seed. They had disappointing losses this year. They were not the team everyone thought they would be going into the year, and yet they are still among the hardest teams to beat, even when the refs are not calling things their way, because I know that was a major thing throughout the year for them. But it's scary to think what this team has to I mean, really, what do they have to lose? Maybe when Kelsey retires, we're going to see some issues on that offense because they haven't really been able to rebuild the offensive skill positions like they had before when it was, I mean, obviously they got Hardman back this year, but it was Hardman and Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelsey, and they were like unguardable.
Right.
Now it's kind of like Rashee Rice has been pretty good for them, but who else has really been there? I know Valdez-Scantling was okay at points. Kelsey had his up and downs this year. He came through in the playoffs, but this has the potential to be a better team next year.
Yeah.
And solely because they fixed what was one of their major glaring issues coming down the stretch was that defense. Now that defense is looking really good. They're very young. They still have Mahomes. They still have some pretty decent offensive line play. They got the running game in Pacheco now that they've missed since the Kareem Hunt incident. They could be even better next year. That's the scariest part.
Yeah, it really is, man. Like this was a flawed team. The last 2 years, and before, because Rick is going to, we have one more video of Rick here. He's going to like kind of springboard us to talk about like the specific game itself. When it comes to the Chiefs, and I guess we could get the preamble for the Chiefs. Well, it wouldn't be preamble because it's like post game, but we could get this part of it out of the way before we talk about the game and then going forward. But like the last 2 years, ironically, as coinciding with when we began doing this on a weekly basis, going into last season, we were, I guess technically 2023 is now last season, but 2022 for people know what I mean. But going into 2022, we talked about the arms race of the AFC West, right? And how all these teams were trying to gear up. And the Raiders, they got Chandler Jones and, Devontae Adams. The Denver Broncos bringing in Russell Wilson, new offensive mind coming in. What could that team be? The Los Angeles Chargers, big name. They tooled up. They added to that defense. They added Khalil Mack. They added J.C. Jackson. They added Sebastian Joseph Day. Mike Williams was emerging into this, high caliber player. They were trying to fix that offensive line. And that was the story of 2022. 2022 was the year where, we believed, and I forget where your prediction was on this stand, Justin, but I thought the Chargers were going to win that division that year, as did Rick. A lot of people thought that was the Chiefs weren't going to miss the playoffs. No one was saying that the last years, but that they were going to take a step back.
Chargers that year, but I did. I think I picked the Raiders.
Did you?
Yeah.
So it I bring it up only to say we thought 2022 was a step back year, right? Like that was the year where internally in that division alone, it was supposed to be bloodshed, right? Mm-hmm. And the Chiefs made it out, win the division again, go through the AFC, make it to the Super Bowl, win the Super Bowl. Dang, okay. But then this year, like you mentioned, the defense is getting fixed, but all the drop issues. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, just super inconsistent. Kadarius Toney, falling off the face of the earth at this point. Sky Moore, falling off the face of the earth at this point. Funny enough, two guys that made a single play in the Super Bowl win against the Eagles, just not being able to live up to the expectations of what was, when they were both brought in. Sky Moore via the draft, and then Kadarius Toney via trade with the Giants. And now you have it where this team, the defense is great, yes, but they still had a weakness or two in there, right? Like there was still a sign where if you could get a play or two off against this defense and you could go down and score on them. This wasn't Legion of Boom or this wasn't the no-fly zone type defense. You could beat them, but you had to be really good to beat them. But they were still beatable. And this was an offense where, like you said, aside from Kelsey and then Rashee Rice, that kid coming out party in the playoffs this year, and how good and consistent he was and just reliable. He was able to do his thing. And like you said, Mecole Hardman, there were struggles in this postseason as well. The fumbles, I think, in the game against the Buffalo Bills were the big one, where like their season could have ended there if the Bills had been able to take advantage. But they were able to respond to that. There was Marquez Valdez-Scantling, showed up a couple times in fourth quarters for the Chiefs, right? With like just a big catch on the drive that they needed. Wasn't there the first three, but was there in the fourth quarter for them. Like there was a lot of inconsistency on this offense. This was the weakest this offense looked. This was the worst this offense looked. I think in the Mahomes era, this season was the latest they ever clinched a division. This was the latest they ever clinched the AFC West. And they went through the AFC and they made it to the Super Bowl. And what did they do? They did it again. So let's get to the actual game analysis itself. And that's where we bring in our friend once again for the second and final time for this episode, the Podfather, to talk about the game and give us a nice jumping off point for our discussion, Justin.
For someone who picked the Chiefs to beat the 49ers in the Super Bowl, you think I'd be a little more excited about it, but it really wasn't. I mean, the game was fine. It was a good game coming down to the end, and overtime was a very exciting finish, but it all kind of felt like you knew by a certain point that once the Chiefs started coming back that the game was pretty much over. I guess that's why Steve Wilkes had to be fired, even though he's not the real problem. The problem was Kyle Shanahan's offense. The third Super Bowl in a row, there's been a problem with Kyle Shanahan's offense that he's been involved in. Shocking. Mahomes is still the GOAT, man. It doesn't matter who's on his team. Like, Tyreek Hill could be there, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who his receivers are. It doesn't matter who his running backs are. CEH could have a 1,000-yard season or could be just a disaster. It doesn't matter. He's still going to make the guys better around him better. Rashee Rice was huge down the stretch. Mecole Hardman, sorry, Justin, was the guy who caught the game-winning touchdown. Travis Kelce had 9 catches. The defense did great for Kansas City. The defense is the thing that we've talked about the least with the Chiefs, with guys like Karlaftis and Anudike Uzama and McDuffie, who's been one of the best cornerbacks we've ever seen. The Chiefs team was good, man. The Niners just didn't stand up to the test, and that's why Kansas City won the Usher Bowl, or the Taylor Bowl, or the Lana Del Rey's Broken Collarbone Bowl, or the what in God's name was Ice Spice doing in the Box Bowl. I don't know. That's what happened.
So as he names all the celebrities that were there at the end there, I think this is the perfect point. Justin, we've alluded to it. Let's say once again, 25-22, Kansas City over San Fran. This was a game, like Rick alluded to there, tale of two halves. This one, first half was just pure, like I think a lot of it was good defense, but a lot of it was just offenses just not being able to do it. But again, part of this is how good both those defenses were. First drive, San Francisco, moving the ball down the field. It's looking good. They're getting CMC in early. That's been a thing with Kyle Shanahan Super Bowl teams in the past. They get away from the run game, but it looks like they're trying to feed him early. Fumble. And this is the kind of thing where you almost get scared. Like, oh my God, Kansas City, their defense just picked up a fumble for them. This is big. This is confidence for that defense. And this is big for the Chiefs to be able to do. Nope. Instant 3-and-out. 49ers defense showed up there. Niners punt. Chiefs punt. First score is a field goal. Chiefs next drive, fumble. They got a big play on this drive too where they fumbled. It was 5 plays, 66 yards looking at it. The big play that they got was, and they actually fumbled twice on this drive, by the way. They recovered the first one for themselves. And after that first fumble, it was then a 52-yarder to Hardman, right? And then one play later, a fumble by Pacheco, and Niners get the ball, right? Niners can't do anything with it, though. They punt. Chiefs punt. Niners finally get the touchdown, and then the Chiefs get a field goal to end the half, and then that's where it goes. Start of the second half. Justin, interception. Mahomes throwing an interception? By George, this could be the opportunity, and it's punted. But the Chiefs get the ball back, and it's punted. And there's another punt before finally the Chiefs get a field goal. The punts continue before finally we get a little bit of action here. Touchdown by the Kansas City Chiefs on a muffed punt return by the San Francisco 49ers. So special teams really proven to be the difference there. Just one play, simple touchdown for KC. San Fran is able to charge back and get a touchdown with a blocked extra point. Chiefs field goal, Niners field goal, Chiefs field goal, end of regulation. So before we get to overtime, because I think we could have a big conversation about just overtime, Justin. The game itself, and this is where when we now add in like the hindsight, well, not hindsight 2020, but like, the post game of it, where now we know what the future is. Steve Wilkes has been fired. Like the assumption is like, oh, when you fire a coordinator, offense or defense, like they're to blame. Overall in the playoffs, this 49ers team did not play up to the same level, right? Like defensively that they were consistently throughout the year. There was obviously the rough first half that they had against the Detroit Lions where their defense was like Detroit was just scoring on them. It almost felt like they could score at will. And the Packers game where the defense did their job. Well, they really did their job. They were able to intercept Jordan Love a couple times. So maybe not the Packers game necessarily, but these last two games here. And, when you fire a DC, it's like, oh yeah, the defense to me did not, again, is not, there's multiple things. We can't just say it's one person's fault. Like you said, I think that's being disingenuous here. But expanding the conversation, when you really look at it, this was a game that even though it went to OT and it finished 25-22 for the total points of 47, like this was a defensive battle. And I don't even want to necessarily say that at the end of the day, the 49ers defense just got outplayed. The 49ers defense played Super Bowl championship winning defense here. Allowing Patrick Mahomes to only get 25 points in the Super Bowl, which by the way, they only got the 25 because it went to OT, 19 points in regulation for Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs in a Super Bowl. I think that's only the second lowest next to the Tampa Bay Super Bowl where they lost, right? So in 4 Super Bowl appearances, your defense is responsible for the second lowest output for them offensively in regulation. And you lost. There's a lot to say there. I know I just went through the game. I know I broke down a lot there. So we could go back for it, Justin. We could go wherever you want to go to. But what are like the first, not just one, because again, we can't just simplify to one play, 2 plays, or even a player or coach, like I said. What are some of the things that you look at in review of this game that stick out to you when we talk about how this game went? And again, let's ignore overtime for a second, just of how this game got to overtime. We were tied 19-19 at the end of regulation.
So I obviously you got to shout out the defense. I think the Kansas City defense played an excellent game. They kept the team in the game. Juwan Johnson, great game. Kills me because unfortunately I did bet that Juwan Johnson would have the first touchdown. It's the first bet I've made in years. I had Juwan Johnson scoring the first touchdown, and he threw the ball.
Oh, Juwan Jennings, you mean?
Juwan
right?
Jennings, yes. Juwan Jennings threw the ball to McCaffrey instead of scoring it himself. Cost me $3,000. Anyways, he had a fantastic game. He was him and McCaffrey were really the only major players on offense. Kittle really wasn't involved. Debo was involved minimally. The Chiefs did a great job of shutting down their big weapons. Ayuk didn't really have a ton of targets. They had a great game plan. I mean, for everything that they've been through, the Chiefs knew how to stop an offense of that caliber and of that style. So good on that defense. Mahomes obviously coming through in the clutch like he's done so many times, time and time again. He finds ways to win the game. It's unbelievable. It really truly is. Like I can't get over the fact that they drove down the field. They made that stop and were able to drive down the field for the field goal at the very end of the game. I mean, forget the touchdown. Once they got the ball in overtime, you kind of knew it was over. For them to go down the field and tie it up, I was almost surprised that they didn't go for it and try to win the game in regulation. But I'm glad they didn't because it made for a great overtime game. It was, all in all, it was a very good football game. And really, it's gotta come down to the play of the defense on the Chiefs. I really think that's what it is. I mean, you don't want to boil it down to one play, but really the biggest play of the game was that blitz. And I'll keep saying it. It was that blitz.
Yep. It was like you mentioned before, it was a corner blitz where the line, especially like Chris Jones getting straight to Brock Purdy, and he like you want to talk about the definition of zero time to get the ball off and to make a read, because honestly, like people have shown the replay of that blitz you're talking about, Justin. if Purdy had like a second and a half more in the pocket, Ayuk would have been open. Ayuk ran his route perfectly. He would have been open. And it's like you said, whenever we talk about these games, like it's hard to, and we try not to be disingenuous. Like it's more than just one play that made the difference, right? Like it's more than one player and one thing. And like you said, it's the defense as a whole and the play calling by Steve Spagnuolo, a Hall of Fame caliber defensive coordinator that dude is. Jesus Christ, he's absolutely fantastic when it comes to getting this team ready in Super Bowl, especially. It just feels like this Kansas City Chiefs defense, when they need to make a stop, they can make a stop. And this postseason run, especially, they were able to do that. But like you said, it was that big blitz. It was whatever they were doing to make Brock Purdy just not want to throw the ball and make him not look comfortable. Like in theory, like if you look at the base stats, 23 of 38, 255 yards, 1 touchdown, 0 interceptions. He only got sacked the one time, but of course, you need to look past just the one sack. It's about quarterback pressures, time in pocket, et cetera, et cetera. So it's more than just that. But if you look at it, like it was a decent game by San Francisco, but decent is not what the San Francisco 49ers do. But like you said, is this Chiefs defense that was phenomenal throughout this playoff run. I don't know if I forget what the exact tweet itself was. I don't have it pulled up or saved here necessarily, but it was the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs, I think it was they're the first team to face 4 of the top 6 scoring offenses in the league's regular season throughout their postseason run, because the Dolphins, the Bills, the Ravens, and the 49ers. That's a pretty good set of teams. And people saying that this is arguably the best postseason run that a team, and people say more specifically the quarterback, but if we just focus on the team itself that had to go through, when you talk about facing a talented Dolphins team, you talk about going on the road for the first 2 times in this specific core's era. This is the first time they had a road postseason game, let alone 2 of them. They won both of them. Like big picture, it's phenomenal by Kansas City. Like you said, it's the defense, but I want to go into kind of what you talked about, like the plays that. There's the plays that were made, the plays that weren't made. And like, Justin, when we talk about San Francisco here, you said it, Jawan Jennings and Christian McCaffrey, the 2 guys that showed up. Jennings, he had his 42 receiving yards. He had that, dude, that touchdown that he scored, that was starting to get people excited. I know it wasn't the first score for you, so it wasn't for your bet. Like, didn't help you out with your bet, Justin. But, he gets it, he goes, and how many guys did he have to like get off of him? Like 2-3 guys that he was able to just absorb the contact through and get past to get into the end zone. That was a much needed touchdown right there. He showed up in the moment where it mattered the most. McCaffrey, not the most efficient running game for him, just overall for both teams. There were some struggles running the football, but McCaffrey, 80 rushing yards, 80 receiving yards. That's still pretty good either way you want to dice it, right? 30 total touches between receptions and carries, 160 yards and a touchdown. That's pretty good right there, to say the very least. And I think, there's some things that San Francisco did, but there's some things that they didn't do. And I think, as we're going to talk about here in a couple moments, I think, Justin, Brandon Ayuk only had 3 catches for 49 yards. And again, part of that, we could definitely say the Kansas City Chiefs, we've both made reference to it, Justin, this Kansas City Chiefs defense that in their first 2 Super Bowls was kind of perceived as, you could maybe say, the weakness of the team compared to the offense. Not the case this season. This was a Kansas City Chiefs defense that could make plays. Chris Jones coming back, double-digit sack season. Dude didn't even play the whole year. He missed time, willingly missed time, and he still got double-digit sacks in the season. This is a young linebacking core led by Nick Bolton, who's just phenomenal, to say the very least. That kid's going to get paid here, I think, within the next, 2 years, if I'm not mistaken?
I think so.
Yeah, and then you have that cornerback duo between McDuffie and Snead. That's another contract they're going to have to address. Again, we'll talk about that in a moment in terms of Snead, but that cornerback duo, phenomenal. And Reed, the pickup that they him a couple years ago, I remember he was to me, he was one of the big pickups of that offseason. Yeah. He could play safety, and they also had, he's a safety linebacker hybrid. There's just something about the Kansas City Chiefs when they pick up a safety from the Houston Texans, they just win a Super Bowl, at least one with the guy. Because remember, Tyrann Mathieu, same exact thing. He was in Houston, went to Kansas City. They got that first Super Bowl, made 2 of him, and now Reed, boom, 2 Super Bowl rings. What a time! What a time! So Houston Texans safeties, you're going to get some phone calls in the next couple of off seasons, to say the very least. But in all seriousness, we talked a lot about the Chiefs. Let's focus a little bit on San Fran here, Justin. Again, to me, the biggest disappointment for San Fran, obviously aside from losing, let's look past that for a moment. There's the big decision that everyone's talking about, and we'll get to that here with overtime in a moment. But to me, My biggest pitfall for San Francisco and what they just were unable to do in the second half, or the whole game, but especially the second half, I don't understand why Brandon Ayuk, they didn't try to get more set plays on him, because he had 3 catches in this game for 49 yards. And I think I texted you guys during the game. It felt like every single catch he got was a first down. Like, and remember early in the season, it wasn't even that early. I think it was the first half of the season for San Fran. Wasn't there some absurd statistic where like 30% of his catches for the Niners was either a first down or a touchdown?
I think it was through the first 3 games, he did not have a catch that was
Not a first down.
Or a touchdown.
And then
He had
like
an insane tear in the
Yeah.
first 3 games. And then he kind of went quiet, especially when Debo got hurt, Kittle went down. He was the guy there, and he was getting double teamed. They were getting after Purdy. They were stacking the box, and they couldn't get the ball to him anymore. And that's kind of what happened here. They stacked the box. They got after Purdy, and Kittle was mainly used to block, which he's a great blocking tight end, but you need the offensive production. And Debo really wasn't anything. So they were giving the ball to McCaffrey. They were giving the ball to Jennings, but they couldn't get the ball to their best receiver, and that was Brandon Ayuk.
And this is one of those things where, and again, I'm not saying this because I'm saying this is all San Fran not able to scheme it. Obviously, a big part of this was the Chiefs, but it's kind of like what my complaint was in the Ravens game, how the Ravens only had 8 designed run plays. There, if you're Kyle Shanahan, you're supposed to be this offensive guy. There have to be a couple more plays where, yes, with what the defense is throwing you, you got to have a play or two where you get Ayuk in the right situation where Purdy could just get him the ball and he can make a play on it. And this is one of those things I think with San Francisco you need to look at, and it's that on the surface they ran the ball a lot, but I think a lot of that was more so in the first half, and then in the second half they started to just be very pass heavy. I think I know for sure at least one of the punts, but maybe was it not back-to-back punts where there was a stretch where it was 4 or 5 straight plays where it was only passing, and that coincided with one of their punt, like 3 and outs, and then another one that was like a 4 or 5 play punt. Like there was some instance in there where it was literally just San Fran passing only, and they weren't trying to run the ball again. And this falls back into the typical, like Rick referenced it in his video, of Kyle Shanahan, just for whatever reason, second halves, he's like this, the games get away from him in the Super Bowl. It happened in the 28-3 game, which God forbid, I think he's still getting therapy for. It happened in the game a couple years ago with the Chiefs the first time. And then I'm not going to say it's necessarily the same in this one, but it's, I don't even want to say it's necessarily just the running, but just the scheming. It felt like there was something lacking in the second half for him compared to that first half. They were moving the ball, even though they didn't finish, which again, that's its own issue. They had good drives in the first half that they just, shot themselves in the foot.
So it seems like they changed their strategy in 2 of the games. And now the first one, 28-3, it's because Mac, the center, broke his femur at the end of the first half. Played the rest of the game, but they had to change their scheming drastically to adjust for him not being at full strength. He was a major reason why they were there in the first place. He had an excellent season, and unfortunately, they just could not score any points to keep that game out of reach for Tom Brady. The other game that they changed their strategy was this most recent Super Bowl, and it didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. They went from run first, run heavy, power football to kind of trying to throw the ball on first and second down, and it wasn't really working for them. It didn't really seem to make a lot of sense. I mean, even Tony Romo is coming out and saying, like, why are they doing this? Why is this what's happening right now? They have Christian McCaffrey. He's been running the ball great. Even if you're going to be behind the sticks, at least do it on your terms. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't behind. I understand the feeling that you need to put up more points if you want to beat the Chiefs, but there's nothing wrong with killing the clock. There's nothing wrong with tiring out a defense. And the way that their offensive line played in passing situations down the stretch, it wasn't great. I mean, Purdy was under pressure. They were throwing the ball a ton. Like, why not stick with what was working? And what was working was feeding Christian McCaffrey. So, and also, I mean, everyone knew the strength of this team, of this defense going in, was their secondary and their pass rush. They were not, I mean, they weren't a bad run defense, but they were a middle of the pack run defense, the Chiefs, going throughout the season. And it didn't make sense as a matchup. Like, there's a reason that the Niners were favored. It's because matchup wise, they fit well if they were to play to their strengths.
Yeah.
And in the second half, they just, for whatever reason, they just didn't do that.
Yeah.
It's,
No, we're both confused because again, this is Kyle Shanahan deviating away from what was working in the first half, and you mentioned it. Like, to me, the biggest play for me, the biggest missed opportunity, I think ultimately, it's not even because I had some people trying to point out, I saw some people trying to point out line, well, there's the missed point after, right? And if the Chiefs hadn't been able to block that, the Niners would technically win. Not true, because on the final drive, obviously, if they're down 4, the Chiefs are going for the touchdown there. Like, so you can't say that.
there would not have been overtime.
No, I know, but that's if that point had never been blocked, yes, the Chiefs would need more than just the field goal at the end. But what I'm saying is that they're going for the touchdown. You understand what I mean? Like, you can't just automatically assume the Chiefs are only going for the field goal at the end. The Chiefs settled for a field goal, kind of like you mentioned.
They had opportunities after the fact.
No. I understand. I'm not making excuses, but I'm saying
the 49ers had choices after the fact. It has nothing to do with the blocked extra point. Like, it was bad. Sure, it might have been a different game. I'm agreeing with you. But there was plenty of other opportunities after the fact that they could have sealed that game.
Agreed. And for me, like you mentioned it. No, excuse me. Rick mentioned this in his video of, it feels like in most games there's a moment where you think the tide has turned, right? Like, where even if it doesn't happen immediately, that is the moment where you look back at it and said, this is where like you could start to point this out for this game. You want to know what it was for me personally? After the Chiefs get the ball to start the second half, right? I forget how many plays it was in. Interception by Mahomes. Again, how often does he get intercepted in the playoffs? How often does he get intercepted in the Super Bowl?
The first one in 11 playoff games, I think they said.
Yep, the Niners got the interception. And the offense, if it wasn't a 3 and out, it was 4 or 5 plays and gone. How can you waste that opportunity? Your defense got the interception in good field position too. Like, I think they were close to the like, I don't know if they were in their own territory to be able to go down and score. Maybe they were just outside. They were basically at midfield. You could not ask for a better situation. The Chiefs, part of the reason why the Chiefs settled for a field goal at the end of the first half, because they knew they were going to get the ball out to start. So the Chiefs' mindset was, let's just get a field goal, 10-3. We come out, we score in the second half, 10-10. It's a whole new ball game right there. Your defense got you the interception, and you wasted. And that, to me, was the moment where it was starting to stir for me, be like, oh, Kansas City is going to come back to this one. And like, that moment for me, like, if we had to, I'm not saying like this moment changed the game, but I'm saying if we had to, for ourselves, looking back at that game, the moment where you started to think this is going to turn around here soon enough, that was the moment for me where that offense just could not take advantage of the fact that they were actually able to intercept Mahomes, who, like, for all intents and purposes, Mahomes was having a bad game for the first 3.5 quarters. Let's be real, or I'll just say 3 quarters. The first 3 quarters was not a good game for Patrick Mahomes. The first 3 quarters,
he started to turn it up a little bit in the third quarter. But yeah, I agree with you. He didn't look that great, and we don't want to blame Mahomes for this. I mean, you can if you want to, but like, realistically, this is something we've said all year. They didn't have the weapons. They weren't consistent on offense. The defense was keeping them in games, and Mahomes was clutch enough that he could have them in position and get them a win down the stretch.
Yep.
Exactly what happened.
Yeah. And this is the thing for me where it shouldn't have been that case, because the Niners, after that interception, should have scored. It should have been 17-3. It should have been things going in your way. It should have been, you're going to exercise the demons if you're Kyle Shanahan. It should have been for McCaffrey and for Kittle and for guys like that, for Trent Williams, 3 guys who should all be up for Hall of Fame considerations once their careers are done. Should be adding a ring to their collection, but that wasn't the case. And that, to me, was one of the points for me personally. Again, that's the point where I started to have a lot of trepidation on how that game was going to go for San Francisco, because when you throw away that opportunity, when the other team gave you that, the second turnover of that game, by the way, the first one you weren't able to score, you could maybe, I stress maybe you could argue it was still early enough in the game when that first fumble happened, or it's still in the first half trying to figure stuff out. Okay, sure, they weren't able to score. To me, there's no excuse at all. And I'm not saying this to degrade the Chiefs defense. I'm saying from a San Francisco point of view, whether you're a fan of them, you pick them, whatever. And ironically, the 2 San Francisco picks here talking about this post game. The fact that they threw away that opportunity to score off of a Mahomes interception, where who knows how that game finishes out for Kansas City if San Fran starts to get that momentum. If that defense sees their offense score a touchdown after that play, that's a big confidence boost for them. That is a big, big play for them. And then you start to force the hand of Kansas City and what they have to try to figure out and do, man. And I know Mahomes himself, again, this is where we need to expand it because it's not just Mahomes at the end of the day. I know, shocking. It's more than just one or two players on one side of the ball. It's 11 guys. Mahomes and Kelsey, I trust to, after that interception, keep the course. There's 9 other guys there that mentally we don't know what's going on in their heads. And as I know, it's always been the conversation of who's really calling the plays because Andy Reid, of course, is the offensive genius. But between Andy Reid and Matt Nagy, which I'll give you a guess which half of that duo is the lacking one there offensively. You got to wonder if there's a little bit of panic in them. Again, maybe not Reid, but if Reid at any point tells Nagy, hey, what player 2 do you like? If after seeing his team throw an interception, the other team score it, and it's 17-3, you don't think Matt Nagy is going to call a play out of panic there? He probably would have. And maybe that game would snowball more. It's a big what if, and I'm not saying that this definitively would have happened, but you need to give your team, you need to reward your goddamn team for what they're doing for you. And in terms of rewarding, that 49ers offense did not reward their defense in any way, shape, or form on that specific set of plays. The interception and immediately punting it. That to me was my personal turning point for that one. Just looking back at this game, that'll always be the play to me where it's like the Chiefs, even though I think they got a field goal after that. So it was still 10-6. Yes, 49ers still have the lead. But that is the play to me that gave Kansas City the life they needed in that one. That to me was the play. Or the sequence of events, I should say. I shouldn't just call it one play because it's more than one play, as we say. But that's at least the one for me. But Justin, because a lot of what we both talked about here, of course, yes, we've alluded to the end of the game. We talked about regulation. Let's talk about overtime. And let's talk about, and you've already alluded to that final blitz that the Chiefs sent out, which again, Steve Spagnuolo, my hat's off to you, sir. You know how to call the big plays when it matters the most on the defensive side. Good thing you're not a head coach anymore because you sucked as a head coach. But as a defense coordinator, phenomenal. Well, let's be real. He was a bad head coach. But let's talk about before that amazing blitz call, before the Chiefs would go down and score themselves. Justin, the coin flip. We have to talk about this, right? We talked about the flag last year at the end of Chiefs-Eagles. We need to talk about the coin flip here. If there's one thing we could say about these Super Bowls, even though it's always the Chiefs, Justin, we get at least one thing we were able to talk about when it comes to these end of games with these last 2 Super Bowls, right? I think this will involve less arguing than what that flag was last season for us. The coin toss to start overtime and all of the news that we have allegedly heard since the coin toss, right? 49ers win the coin toss. Different set of overtime rules. 49ers choose to get the ball. Now, if this was EA Sports Madden, I understand that decision because I wouldn't trust my defense either against the CPU on Hall of Fame difficulty. Here's the problem. It's not EA. It's real life. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is kind of Hall of Fame difficulty itself, so maybe you might have a point there. I'll give you a half a point. But everything else, I think we were confused in that moment, right? Where, why did you choose with the new rules to? Because this was the perspective. This was the perspective that we've seen. Again, we need to bring in a little bit of what were people's reactions after the fact into this. Of if you're San Fran, yes, you could to an extent see the mindset of you go down, you score, you're forcing the Chiefs to have to get the touchdown, right? Like if you score that touchdown, they need to score the next touchdown, right? I understand that perspective, right? There is some validity to it. But there's the other way. What if you got stopped? Which nearly happened twice before the final scoring. If you get the field goal, that's Patrick Mahomes that needs to get the touchdown. And what does Patrick Mahomes do in the overtime of postseasons? He wins them because I think he's undefeated in postseason OTs. Or actually, no, he has the one loss to Tom Brady. So that aside, man, oh man, I'm bringing this up, Justin, because you had to have seen it yourself. A lot of people criticized the coin toss decision by the Niners of them wanting to get the ball first. And then there was the talk after where some of the guys on San Francisco were saying that they were unaware of the new postseason rules. But I also remember seeing at least one or two of the guys on San Francisco alluding to the fact that they actually did know the postseason rules. And whether the players not new, I think is, I mean, you should know.
The players should know, but
Oh, 100%.
the people that are making the decisions, I'm sure, knew.
Yeah.
I didn't really see a problem with. I mean, I thought it was the right call. This is the game. This is all the stops, every single thing that you have in your bag of tricks you're pulling out right now, and you have to believe you're going to score a touchdown.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then you're believing in your defense, which has gotten you this far. I mean, let's face it, they had a fantastic defense all year round. And B, even if your defense fails you, guess what? We're still going down the field and scoring again. It doesn't matter what happens now. We can kick a field goal. It's over. So in my mind, that's the reason that they took it. I didn't see a problem with it. The only issue is you have to score.
Yeah.
You have to score. You have to make a stop.
You have to finish the drive.
One or the other. You have to be the one that finishes the drive. And this is why I like the new rules in the postseason for the playoffs. And it's because you're deciding it as a team. You have both the opportunity to end the game on offense and on defense. No matter what, you have the opportunity to end it twice. If you don't,
that's on you. No, 100%. Like, I'm not saying that this definitively cost them a game, but I'm saying the dialogue afterwards.
The call is not what I had the issue with. I think he made the right call. If I'm Mike Shanahan, that's not why I'm upset.
Kyle, you mean?
Whatever the
Mike's probably upset too. I think he wants.
If I'm a Shanahan at all, I'm not upset with the call. All right, I'm upset with the fact that we couldn't stop him twice.
Yep,
that's really what it is, and that's why Steve Wilkes lost his job. And I don't necessarily think he should have lost his job, and I don't think that he's the one that should be to blame. But really, when it comes down to it, in the last 2 drives, you could not stop the Chiefs. You didn't score enough points to outscore them for the rest of the game. That's what it comes down to.
Yep.
Because no matter what happens in the first 4 quarters, 3 3/3 of a quarter.
I get what you're saying.
2/3 of a quarter. If you can't stop Patrick Mahomes on the last drive in a close game, he's going to beat you.
And if you can't score a touchdown, he's going to beat you.
He's going to beat you. That's what he's made his bread and butter on. And we go back and forth with the argument about Patrick Mahomes is the greatest and blah, blah, blah. And everyone that I make the argument with, they'll come out and tell you he's not the best quarterback in the NFL. He's the best football player in the NFL. He does what needs to be done, and he's not the fastest. Yep. He's not the strongest. Yep. He doesn't jump the highest. Yep. He is arguably the smartest.
Yep.
Because you could see on the plays where he chooses not to do things, the way it develops, and you're like, oh, that's cool. When he has interceptions, most of them are tipped. And he is just so good at the game that he makes things happen.
Yep.
And guess what? Once again, for the let's argue. I mean, 6th time in 6 years, they made it to 6 straight AFC Championship games. They made it to 4 Super Bowls.
4.
They made it to 4 out of 6 Super Bowls. They've won 3 out of 4 Super Bowls that they were in. This dude makes things happen.
Yeah.
No matter what. Again, he may not be the most accurate passer. Sure, this is the best downfield passer we've seen since Russell Wilson was in his prime, because Russell Wilson used to be able to throw a gorgeous long ball. I know that hurts you, Jerk, but he did. And that's why
I was waiting for you to move on. I would have allowed the point to go, but continue.
He's not the pinpoint passer that we see in guys like Joe Burrow. Even Justin Herbert. Like, Justin Herbert makes some beautiful throws. And I'm not saying that Mahomes doesn't have the ability to make these throws, but that's not how he wins games. He doesn't need to make the perfect throw to win games, because he stays in games by making every throw.
Yep.
He makes everything possible. And I don't know. I'm tired of gushing over this guy, but
I get what you mean. Yeah. The commentators do that enough as well.
They're just, you need to do better as a team.
Oh yeah.
They weren't good enough as a team.
As a league, all 31 other teams, what do we always say, Justin? I think, did I not text this? Or maybe it was my other chat. When you come at the king, you best not miss.
Yeah, everyone said that.
The Chiefs have been the kings of this league the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. And now, like you mentioned, when we're talking about the idea of the repeat, they're going for the 3-peat. Immediately. immediately after the game finished. Didn't even let a second to breathe. And I know Tony Romo doesn't speak for the team, but Tony Romo talked about the idea of the three-peat and that this team could go after it. And honestly, and again, maybe this could be a potential offseason thing that we do as we get closer to the season itself, like looking at the other repeat champions in NFL history in the Super Bowl era. Because the big thing that we need to point out is that there technically has been a three-peat in NFL, but that was NFL championships before it became the Super Bowl era. We just need to point that out for the people. But like in the Super Bowl era, you think about the teams that have repeated. Is this not maybe arguably the biggest threat to the three-peat of it? Like just like, dude, the talent on this team, the greatness of this guy, like you said. And I will say, like for himself, like I think Patrick Mahomes in every single possible quarterback category, he's top 2 in every single metric you want to say, and he's either 1 and 2 in each of them. But like you said, it's the perfect way. He can make every throw there is. And it's not always the perfect throw. Like, because you mentioned that some of his interceptions get tipped. Every once in a while, a pass or two of his is probably off the mark, but one of his guys gets it. Now, for the most part, Patrick Mahomes is extremely accurate. But there's a play every once in a while that gets made where it's his receiver that made the play rather than his throw being like, that dime in the bucket type of deal, right? But he can make every single play. He can make every single throw. And this defense, this Chiefs defense, they were able to do it. Man, oh man, oh man. Just greatness. just pure greatness is kind of what we have to say at the end of the day. And to your point, like just the last thing to bring up about the overtime thing, like I could see both sides to the argument. The people that were like you saying, like, yeah, if you're the 49ers, get the ball first, you believe in yourself, try to score a touchdown. I 100% see that point. I can also see the point of if you give the Chiefs the ball first, see what they do. Where if they score a touchdown, right? Mm-hmm. They ended up doing it anyways. If they score a touchdown, then I think the idea of, well, now you need to pull out. You talk about pulling out all the stops. You need to pull out all the stops because at the end of the day, you need to score a touchdown here because you need to tie this game. I could see it from both sides. At the end of the day, like you said, if you were in that same situation, if we turned you into
what would you rather do? Would you rather have to score twice or would you rather have to make 2 stops? That's what it comes down to.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying ignoring the end of regulation. I'm saying just overtime, right?
Yeah. No, in overtime.
Yeah.
Would you rather have to score twice or would you rather have to make 2 stops?
Well, Rick asked this question. I was wondering about it here. Like, let's say if the Chiefs had gotten the touchdown, like let's play it other way. Let's say Chiefs get a touchdown, then let's say 49ers get a touchdown and overtime technically runs out. Do they do another would they have done another coin flip or would it just
matter? They keep going.
Keep going, right?
That's what Tony Romo said. Tony Romo said it doesn't matter if the clock runs out here. They keep playing.
You keep going. Okay.
Yeah. Even if I mean on that specific drive. If they get the ball back, I maybe they flip another coin if they score at the end of the regulation of the overtime regulation and they have to go again. I don't really know. Yeah. But thankfully we don't have to know this year.
Right. Exactly.
It comes up again. But yeah, look, it's very simple to me. If I am playing Patrick Mahomes,
yes.
Do you want to stop him twice?
Or you want to try to score twice?
Yeah. That's all it is. Because at the other way around, if you're in the position the Chiefs were in, at your very best, you still have to stop him again.
Yes.
To me, I'm getting the ball first still.
Right. You're talking about if you're the 49ers.
I'm the 49ers. If you choose to kick the ball off.
Yes.
Now not only do I have to stop Patrick Mahomes twice, but if he scores on the first drive, if he scores a touchdown, the very best that I could do is prolong. And now we're back into the single overtime rules, the sudden death overtime rules.
Where then you need to now stop him.
But then I need to stop him again, no matter what.
And as Harrison Butker showed in that game, Duke could kick it from long.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't even have to do that much. No, I understand. Like, again, I'm not disagreeing with a lot. I'm saying that there were 2 different points of view. You know what the funny part is, Justin? All the social media comment sections I went into, like that, where people were talking about it, you are the one person that put it so eloquently of what would you rather do? You want to score twice or stop them twice? You're the only person, which is why we're the best we're the best NFL podcast running there. Look at that. Justin just putting all you to shame. Look at that. So that being said, that ends, I think, the game portion of the conversation, the in-game stuff. I think we've said everything. Props to the Podfather, Papa Podfather, for being on the show as he's been so far. Don't have anything from him for this last portion here, but we're going to talk about this really quick, Justin. A very brief look ahead to the future of both of these teams. Justin, if you had to pick excuse me, you have to pick one thing with each of these teams to look forward to them doing in the offseason, what do you think it would be? Doing / addressing / whatever.
Obviously the 49ers are going to have to fill a defensive coordinator position. I think it's going to be very important for them because I think their defense is on a fringe. They're going to have a lot of free agents that are going to need to be signed, and they have a lot of money tied up. But really, what it's going to come down to, in my mind, is for both teams is the receivers. Do the Niners keep Ayuk, who was, again, their second best playmaker on offense? I was going to say best, but I really can't discredit Christian McCaffrey and all he's done all year round. And are the Chiefs going to be able to add to what's already one of the best runs in NFL history? And the way they do that, I think, is finally bringing in a guy like Mike Evans who can just destroy defenses. I mean, can you imagine Mike Evans did what he did on the Bucs this year for the Chiefs? Come on. It hurts. It really does. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. But I think it's really going to come down to the offensive skill positions that they can add or hold on to.
Right. I definitely think, for both teams, you bring up a good point because Ayuk, he's now let me just pull this up again to make sure I was correct in doing this. But now 2024 is his 5th-year option. So that they now need to work on the idea of the long-term deal for him. What's that look like? And we know when that happens, you need to subsequently look at the other big contracts you have. And look, Trent Williams is on a good money deal. He's reaching the final years of his Hall of Fame career, right? You have Kittle, Samuel, and Run CMC. All 3 of those guys are on contracts. All 3 of those guys are paid. You need to start to look at what the long-term future is. Could 2024 be the final season for one of those 3 as a San Francisco 49er? Or like you said, is Ayuk's long-term future the one, and maybe he's going to be the one that's no longer a 49er after 2024? You need to figure. We were having some pre-show discussions about video game companies and decisions they have to make long in advance. The 49ers, they need to make that decision right now. Is Ayuk going to be a guy who they keep past this season? And if so, who are they letting go from their skill position?
Well, they have a very big divide in terms of young talent and veteran players. There's not a lot of guys in the in-between there for him. I mean, they got Kittle, they got Debo, they got Bosa, but really most of their players are either aging veterans or really young guys. And it's going to be interesting to see which direction they choose. They're kind of almost at the crossroads that the Rams were at a few years back when they traded for Stafford. What direction are you going to go? And we saw which direction the Rams went the first time. It wasn't great.
Yeah.
Are they going to go the same direction? Will it work out for them? Will they go youth? Will there be a youth movement? Does that mean they cut certain players? Do we see some surprise moves, like maybe moving on from someone who hasn't necessarily lived up to their contract, like Debo? Not saying Debo is bad, but he's been hurt so often. Yep. Is he a guy that stays there? It's going to be really interesting to see which direction they go.
Yep. So I definitely think offensively, like you're saying, for both teams, and the Chiefs are going to be a player this offseason. Like I'd be shocked if they don't make
I don't know what their cap space is. That's the only thing.
Right. But
they didn't have any last year.
You alluded to it before with the draft as well. Like, who's to say they don't just trade a bunch of picks if they find a receiver they really like in this class this time? Maybe more so than both Tony and Sky Moore, man, it sucks to see that he has not panned out the way that I was hoping personally. I did VOs of that kid when he was coming out of his draft. I loved him in the draft process, but that's not. But you talk about the offense. Let me look at the defensive side for both of these teams, just to counter with that, just to bring both sides of the ball. Because I think for the San Francisco 49ers, you mentioned the idea, like with their offense, what they're going to have to do. This defense, we know Nick Bosa is on the long-term deal. They paid him before this past season. What is the rest of this defense going to look like around him now? Because Fred Warner is phenomenal, but Dre Greenlaw is hurt, and if the injury, did they officially say it was a torn Achilles?
I don't remember seeing anything.
So, depending on the severity of his injury, he's going to potentially miss a good chunk of this season in 2024. Like that's a real possibility. Now, if you're San Francisco, the 2 linebackers, the 2 of them being so great, you need to try to figure that out now. And is it going to be someone already on your team that you're going to put in that role and they're going to succeed, or are you going to have to look in the draft, or just to get lucky on a 1-year bargain bin deal with a guy, right? The defense, I've always said, weirdly enough, for the San Francisco 49ers, the defensive backfield has been like, if you have to compare it to the other 2 levels, it's third of those, right? It's, there's Warner and Greenlaw has been the linebackers, and it's been Nick Bosa on that defensive line with talent. It fluctuates between which of the front seven you want to go to, whether it's the front four or the middle three. The defensive backfield has always been the weakest part of that. And do you now, depending on what the talent is in the front seven with the Greenlaw injury now, you're going to have Warner and Bosa, but who's going to surround those two at those two levels? Do you almost need to make a big focus on how could we improve either the secondary or the defense as a whole? Because Chase Young is a free agent. Like, they got him in this past deadline, but he's going to be a free agent. Is he going to be willing to come back on maybe a 1 or 2 year cheap deal to try to prove himself for this team? Because he started to, in flashes, he showed up for this team, right? Is he willing to be there for the short term on decent money to then come back out in free agency in a year or two when if he's proven and revived his career? Who knows? We have to wait and see on that. Linebacking core, like I just mentioned, defense. So I think the defense there is going to be something like, who are they going to bring in to supplement their guys? And on the Chiefs, who are they going to lose? Because Chris Jones didn't sign an extension before the season. He signed a rework deal for 2023. He is a free agent, and they need to figure out what his long-term future is. Mahomes did his contract restructuring. We're probably going to see some news or two in regards to Kelsey or maybe someone else on the offense. They need to figure out a couple things there. Are they going to lose Jones? L'Jarius Sneed, part of the McDuffie and Sneed duo. He is a free agent. Got to think about that. Is his future going to be there? And what is the future going to be for some of the guys on that defense? That I mentioned Nick Bolton before. He's going to be due here in relative short order, right? It might feel like it's a long ways away, but this is the kind of stuff, as we said, good franchises think about this stuff way in advance. Already, if you're the San Francisco 49ers, they're going to be thinking about this stuff and what they have to do for this team for the long term, for who's going to be there for the continued future of this team that is going for this three-peat and is going to continue to go for more. Which, by the way, I was mentioning Nick Bolton before. This is actually his contract year, and he was a second-round pick. So no fifth-year option to play with. They need to figure out this offseason / going into the early part of next season if he's going to be a part of the long-term future of this team. So I think this is not to say that either of us said something more right than the other. I think both of us picking on different things. It's what are these teams going to do offensively to supplement their talent? And then defensively, what's going to happen in terms of who is San Francisco gaining? I think it's honestly funny where I think the 49ers offense, who are they going to potentially lose in this offseason or next? And who on defense are they going to add? Whereas the Chiefs, who are they going to add offensively? And who are they going to lose on the defensive side? That I think is going to be a big thing going into 2024.
It's a good question. I'd have to look at a list of.
Oh no, I'm not asking for an answer. I'm just saying, generally speaking, I think that's what it is that for both of these teams, we both tackled each side of the ball here. It's what's going to happen offensively with these two teams, of course, is big. But what defensively? These were two defenses that went possession to possession against one another. Not directly against each other, but you know what I mean. Where the Niners got their stops, the Chiefs got their stops in this game.
Yeah. Well, the big thing for me is that secondary is going to stay intact in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. Obviously, if they need to figure out contracts and situations like that, but that's to me what kept them in games this year. I mean, between McDuffie and Justin Reed and
L'Jarius Sneed. Yeah,
L'Jarius Sneed, and they were arguably the best secondary in the league this year.
Yep, and we mentioned that they're going to have to figure it out because Sneed, kid's a free agent, and someone's going to be willing to pay him to be a number one corner. Will it be Kansas City? That's one of these questions that we need to ask as we go into it, and that's going to be the fun of what this NFL offseason is going to bring us. Justin, this offseason, I think, is going to be a fun one. We're going to figure out what our schedule is as we go forward. Of course, we're going to have a similar thing here within the upcoming weeks. We're going to take a bit of a break for the pod to kind of refresh it for all three of us and also to let news start to go. We might be doing an extra show or two here within the next week or so, and then we're going to be taking our break here in short order to refresh for us, let the news happen, let things start to populate, and let's start to see what goes down. Like Justin said, we're going to look at the list of free agents, who's going to be going to different spots. We've already listed a couple guys here that whether they're free agents this year or they're going to be due within the next year or two, what's the future of some of these guys going to be? Are we going to see a shock trade or two, right? I think that's going to be a big thing where if a team is not willing to pay someone, what's going to happen? I think immediately we talk about free agents and guys that think get extended. Justin, team that made it a conference championship game, but their guys are hitting free agency. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson on Detroit and Patrick Queen on Baltimore, right? Those are the two runner-ups in each of those conferences. Both those guys are hitting free agency, man. So this is going to be a fun offseason for us that we're going to get to react to the news for. This podcast started in the offseason of the going into 2022, and we're just going to continue to have more offseason fun because, ladies and gentlemen, in month and a half time, I think, give or take from now, the next draft, the next Sports Agents of Chaos mock draft. And we're going to have some fun doing our research for that. And we're going to have a grand old time here on the show because the offseason is always the funnest time of the year. Funnest is a word, right? Yeah, I think so. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Just full Super Bowl in this one. Obviously, we've alluded to talk about other subjects over the last couple of weeks, but things change, things go into order. Cards subject to change, as it is shown both in wrestling and on podcasts in and of itself. But we're happy for all of you that join us here on a weekly basis, and we are going to be coming back over the next week or two. Any last, cleanup things that we need to do to finish off 2023, and then we're going to write off and enjoy the fullness of what is soon going to be the full effect of the 2024 NFL offseason and the long, long road ahead to the 2024 NFL regular season. Justin, any parting words to the people from you before we fully finish out here today?
Goodbye.
I love that. Thank you all so much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, and we will see you guys next time.